Well, hello YouTube, it's me Fortmaster, and welcome to a new reaction. Undertale theory, writing on the wall. So yeah, if you're watching this, you might know that I've been trying to catch up on my Deltarune theories, or theorizing, it's the theory community around Deltarune, just because I realized that I had kind of fallen off. And to start that off, I started watching a fair number of Deltarune theories by a channel called Andrew Cunningham. Now, on all of those, I've been getting a fair number of requests to look at another video, this one in particular, Writing on the Wall, because apparently it's very good, and I, like watching good videos. So yeah, from all of the suggestions I've been getting, I'm going to guess that this is a good video, but also this video is almost an hour and a half long, so you know what that means: multi-part reactions. So yeah, as always, original video is linked in the description if you haven't seen it yet for some reason, as well as links to the second part of this reaction. Corner video will lead again to both the second part of this reaction as well as my Let's Play of the day. And with all that out of the way, let's get this thing actually started then, shall we? Ah, no, it's a garbled noise, no!
Have you ever walked in on a conversation with your friends and thought, what on earth is going on?
Wait, was that Toriel?
The question itself is answerable by simply asking, what are you guys talking about? And if they aren't my friends, they should explain the context of the conversation rather than photoshopping your face onto Kevin James. It should be as simple as that. But now imagine that the conversation you're walking in on is a recording from many years ago. All participants in it have left or have died, and you're left wondering, what on earth is going on? Who do you ask for context? Who will Photoshop you as Kevin James? In Undertale, our entire worldview is shaped solely by what we learn during our adventures through the underground. This world has existed for centuries before we arrived. Many different characters have impacted this world's formation and current climate.
Yeah.
We are completely ignorant of this place, and history didn't start with us. So what do you think our mindset should be if we were to travel through these lands and ultimately come upon ancient messages? Messages that aren't intended for us. Messages whose origins are left to interpretation, and worst of all, these messages are incomplete. How would we begin to understand these messages and their author's original intent behind them? Well, I guess it's like walking into the middle of a conversation, so I guess we'd just start from the beginning.
I mean, it sounds simple enough. Oh, the lab, the true lab, oh. Okay. Writing on the wall. What are you, a slug?
Howdy doody, my name's Soggy. Your name's irrelevant. Now the stuff you just heard at the start of the video will probably not make sense to most people, as I'm not a very good writer. So let me simplify what the video is about and why I zoomed in on the True Lab at the end there. Essentially, the True Lab holds mysteries yet to be fully understood by myself and likely many others. The main mystery being who wrote the True Lab entries. Those old digital notes,
yeah, that's kind of important.
Experiments that we find strewn about the True Lab. This is what I meant by walking into the middle of conversations. These lab notes, if taken at face value, will have us talking across purposes. If you don't know what the True Lab entries are, don't worry, as I'll explain them in detail later in this video.
Yep.
In addition to the True Lab entries, I'll also be diving into a few other topics related to them, and setting up stuff for future videos because I can't explain everything in just this one video. But now, we have reached later in the video, so it's time for me to explain the True Lab entries. Let me tell you what happened here. Welcome to the True Lab, the shady underbelly of the Royal Scientists where the actual, not for the public to see experiments take place. Here works the current Royal Scientist, Alphys, whose meddling with the human souls have turned many monsters who should be dead and dust into shambling amalgams. The Royal Scientists are hired by the King Asgore to do science for the benefit of monster kind. Hopefully. But with goals such as create power to free us all and unlock the power of the soul, just some of the tasks that we currently know of, you'll get some real scope and project creep. So far, that creep has resulted in the discovery of determination, a substance which is plentiful enough in human souls that gives the human souls the power to keep living, and the will to persist, something which monsters' souls lack sufficient quantities of and thus disappear upon death. All these bits of lore and backstory have been catalogued by authors in entries in the True Lab. The entries are shown to us mostly by the screens we find dotted about the lab. They're numbered, however we read them out of order as they weren't all conveniently left for us in the most comprehensive pattern.
Yeah,
they were at least conveniently left for us. They range from entry 1 to 21. So altogether, these are the True Lab entries, and I intend to figure out who's saying what, why are they saying it, and when was it said. Basically, get ready to hear me narrate and explain the True Lab entries for the next 10 or so minutes.
Okay. I'm good with that.
Now, the entries in the True Lab are presented to us mostly out of chronological order as I stated, and appear to us as we approach these screens that are dotted about the True Lab, so I'll explain them in numerical order for you just to make them easier to understand, but just be aware, first appearances are meant to be deceiving.
Of course.
I'll explain in brief detail what's happening in each entry, and I'll also explain how each entry relates to the room they're found in. Entry number 1. This is it. Time to do what the king has asked me to do. I will create the power to free us all. I will unleash the power of the soul. The king, Asgore, presumably not in conjunction with the Queen Toriel, has asked the author of the entry, assumedly a royal scientist, to break the barrier that traps all the monsters underground by vaguely asking them to unleash the power of the soul. This is the start of Project Creep. The current room is the entry hallway of the True Lab from the lab elevator, fitting that we receive explanatory lore dumps here. Entry 2, 3 and 5 are found here as well. Entry 2. The barrier is locked by soul power. Unfortunately, this power cannot be recreated artificially. Soul power can only be derived from what was once living, so to create more, we will have to use what we have now, the souls of monsters. Soul power is something only within living creatures. Presumably, unleashing this power, as mentioned before, would break the barrier, or at least the lock keeping the barrier in place. There are no humans or human souls in containment by the monsters at the moment, judging by this entry.
Yeah, yes.
Entry 3. But extracting a soul from a living monster would require incredible power. Besides being impractical, doing so would instantly destroy the soul's host. And unlike the persistent souls of humans, the souls of monsters disappear immediately upon death. If only I could make a monster's soul last. The author is unable to extract a monster's soul due to the absurd lengths they'd have to go to, and the futility of those lengths given that a monster's soul disappears upon death. A monster's body, unlike a human's, is mostly made of magic, and as a result their body is intrinsically linked to their soul. As such, no body, no soul, and vice versa. So the author wants to make a monster's soul last. Entry number 4. I've been researching humans to see if I could find any info about their souls. I ended up snooping around the castle and found these weird tapes. I don't feel like Asgore's watched them. I don't think he should. The author has gone behind Asgore's back while researching humans, and taken some tapes that he found in the castle. These family tapes document the deception of the king's son, Azrael, by the first human, which eventually led to Azrael getting killed in a convoluted plan. The author assumes that Asgore hasn't seen them, as surely these would have a huge impact on the king. This entry is found in the TV room.
I forgot about that.
The room currently contains shelves of mostly cartoons, assumedly Alphys anime, the current royal scientist. But strangely enough, the tapes that the author had probably watched are already picked out and labelled in chronological order so we can see the aforementioned deception play out on the TV, or at least hear it. The tapes on the left shelf are mostly cartoons, alphabetized, except for some sticky ones. Entry number 5. I've done it. Using the blueprints, I've extracted it from the human souls. I believe this is what gives the souls the strength to persist after death, the will to keep living, the resolve to change fate. Let's call this power determination. The author has used a determination.
You know, I just have to say, I mean, again, as I've said, I haven't played Undertale in so long, but like listening to these again, it's just, these bring back so many memories. First discovering the True Lab. Oh, that was so freaky.
Extractor. They built this using some blueprints and used it to extract determination from a human soul. Note
Well, where
here
did the
that
blueprints come
determination
from?
is not soul power, but a separate essence whose name is actually a combination of termination with the prefix D added to it. Not determination as in determined, but determination as in to reverse termination.
That I never noticed before.
To determinate. We see other instances of words like this, such as refuse during the Azrael fight. Not refuse as in to not cooperate or turn down, but refuse as in fuse with the prefix re added to it, as in to weld or merge back together. We can assume some time has passed, as the author now has access to human souls. The plurality of the word souls here implies that there have been multiple humans that have fallen down and have had their souls extracted.
Okay.
Entry number 6. Asgore asked everyone outside the city for monsters that had fallen down. Their bodies came in today. They're still comatose, and soon they'll turn into dust. What happens if I inject determination into them? If their souls persist after they perish, then freedom might be closer than we all thought. The author has gathered bodies of monsters that have gone comatose or are close to death, normally due to the monster's old age. To monsters, this process is known as falling down. The author is about to inject determination into them, assumedly with the hopes that the monster's bodies or souls don't disappear after death, so that the author can begin to extract or capture the monster's soul once they die. We can assume the author is at least a normal monster like everyone else, as they define freedom as getting out of the underground. Hence, freedom might be closer than we all thought. This entry is also conveniently located just outside the operating room, in the hallway connecting to it. Entry number 7. We'll need a vessel to wield the monster's soul when the time comes. After all, a monster cannot absorb the souls of other monsters, just as a human cannot absorb a human soul. So then, what about something that is neither human nor monster? From the sounds of it, the author has planned to unleash the power of the soul by having a vessel absorb all of the souls that he gathers and wield their power to break the barrier or pass through it.
And that's where
Being
the
that you
flowers
need
come
at
in.
least one human soul and one monster soul to leave the underground, I can only assume that the author is at least trying to achieve that level of soul power. The entry is located in a room filled with golden flowers and for some reason a bunch of mirrors. Entry number 8. I've chosen a candidate. I haven't told Asgore yet, because I want to surprise him with it. In the centre of his garden, there's something special. The first golden flower that grew before all the others. The flower from the outside world. It appeared just before the Queen left. I wonder, what happens when something without a soul gains the will to live? The author has decided to use a golden flower from the outside world to be the vessel for all of the souls they plan on collecting as a surprise for Asgore, an avid gardener. The flower from the outside world, as we know from the story of the first human and Azrael's death, is imbued with the essence of Azrael. The Queen has left by this point. According to the internet, it takes about 95 days for a flower to go from seed to fully grown flower, and the Queen left just before it appeared, assumedly referring to it sprouting, which takes normally around 1 to 2 weeks. If the seeds came back from the surface via the first human body, then we can assume that the Queen left 1 to 2 weeks after the human died and landed in the garden. This entry, if written just after the flower had reached maturity, was written 90 to 100 days after Azrael died. This also implies that the prior entries could also be written in this time frame. This entry is found outside the elevator power room and only activates after we turn the elevator's power back on. I believe it's here for a reason, but I'll explain that in entry 18.
Oh, okay, wonderful, thank you.
Entry number 9.
Also, I'm sorry if I'm not saying a lot. I agree. This is going to be like a very long reaction, but also I'm finding myself just sort of just passively absorbing all of this once again. Again, I love granted, I also love I also like how he's reading them. But I just find myself like reabsorbing all of this, like having memories come back and like remembering stuff from Undertale again.
Things aren't going well. None of the bodies have turned into dust, so I can't get the souls. I told the families that I'll give them the dust back for the funerals. People are starting to ask me what's happening. What do I do? The author is worried. They expected only the souls to be remaining, yet the bodies now refuse to terminate. Assumedly, the families of the monsters don't know what's happening or the extent of the experiments. The entry is found in the operating room. We can assume that this is where the bodies were injected with determination, as the operating tables are sticky. Entry number 10.
Yeah, they were sticky,
Experiments on the
right?
vessel are a failure. It doesn't seem to be any different from the control cases. Whatever, they're a hassle to work with anyway. The seeds just stick to you and won't let go. The author is upset with how sticky the flower seeds are, but why are all the seeds sticky if only one flower was injected with determination and the rest are control cases? Why are the tapes sticky as well? Maybe this is what the mirrors are for, to help pick the flower seeds off after working with them. Oh yeah, this entry takes place in the mirror room.
So at first, I mean, obviously they could be like something similar to like a thistle where they like stick to your like clothes and your hair and stuff like that. But if they mean like sticky, like as in like it's wet and sticky, I mean, could that have something to do with the amalgams? Granted, this is like stuff I haven't thought about in years. Like, I haven't thought of like Undertale theorizing in so long, but still.
Entry number 11. Now that Metaton's made it big, he never talks to me anymore, except to ask when I'm going to finish his body. But I'm afraid if I finish his body, he won't need me anymore. Then we'll never be friends ever again. Not to mention, every time I try to work on it, I just get really sweaty. The author has, with this entry, shown that they are more than likely Alphys, the current royal scientist, as we know them to be the creator of Metaton's body. They also are known for being really sweaty. Alphys seems to be delaying Metaton's body's creation for fear of loneliness. This entry appears in the fan room for some reason. Assumedly, this is because they come in here to cool off after working on Metaton's body and getting really sweaty. Metaton also has a bunch of fans as a TV personality, so there's that as well. That may enter into it.
I guess.
Entry number 12. Nothing is happening. I don't know what to do. I'll just keep injecting everything with determination. I want this to work. The author has now begun to either inject more things with determination and or inject the same things with more determination.
Just shove it in.
Inside the bedrooms in the hallway leading up to it. The context for this entry being here is because of the next entry. Entry 13. One of the bodies opened its eyes. The reckless injecting seems to have worked. And now the bedroom is filled with living monsters. Entry number 14. Everyone that had fallen down has woken up. They're walking around and talking like nothing is wrong. I thought they were goners. The author is shocked that all the monsters are just fine. Being that determination is, as I described, anti-termination juice, it's not hard to figure out what's going on. As an aside, I wouldn't put it past Toby Fox to make the phrase waking up to be the counterpart of falling down. But anyway, this entry is found in the True Lab bedroom. Presumably, this is where all the monsters woke up from falling down. There is a dog bowl here hinting at the dog amalgam we meet later, and a clock broken at what looks to be 3 o'clock.
Okay.
Entry number 15. Seems like this research was a dead end, but at least we got a happy ending out of it. I sent the souls back to Asgore, returned the vessel to his garden, and called all the families and told them everyone's alive. I'll send everyone back tomorrow. The author has sent the human souls back to Asgore. The families now expect their loved ones to return home, and the golden flower that was injected with determination was returned to Asgore's garden. The author will now assumedly start pursuing other vectors of research since this was a dead end.
But that's the thing. Like, granted, I mean, this could point to one of two things. One, it could point to like something like this. You obviously want oh, they came back to life after, you know, being on death's door for so long. You'd think you'd want to like watch them for a while to make sure that, you know, there was no like adverse side effects. So this either points to one of two things. One, Alphys is not a very good scientist, which, I mean, I guess, yeah, I could definitely see that. Or two, it took a long time for stuff to start going wrong with them, which I don't know which is worse, really, when I think about that.
This entry is found just outside the bedroom on the way to the determination extractor. It's sadly ironic that the entry is located here, outside the place where everyone seemed to get better, and that the entry itself is so positive, because of the following entry down the same hallway.
Yeah.
Entry number 16. No. Clearly, everything isn't a happy ending. At this point, we start to understand where the amalgams of monsters we've been fighting so far have come from. Entry 17. Entry 18. The flower's gone. The flower the author injected with determination has disappeared. The entry is found next to entry 8.
That's the thing. This whole thing is that, like, I guess leaning more towards Alphys not being a very good scientist. Like, she was able to do all this, figure out how to get determination out of the soul, and figure out ways to inject it into like monster bodies and the flower. And yet it appears that she didn't have these things under observation long enough to find out, stuff was actually happening.
Deactivated to start off with, and found on the way out of the elevator power room with a familiar smile on it. We find it only after Alphys has already left. These entries were meant to be found by us, and only us, in this order. As if somebody were taunting us.
Yeah,
Entry
we all know who that
19.
is.
The families keep calling me to ask when everyone's coming home. What am I supposed to say? I don't even answer the phone anymore. The author is ashamed to tell the truth. They start to hide from the world. This entry is found for the last 2 entries in the fridge room. Some of the fridges contain samples of some kind. I don't know why the entries are here, but hazarding a guess, I think it's because this place is cold and lonely, like how the author feels right now. Entry number 20. Asgore left me 5 messages today. 4 about everyone being angry, and 1 about this cute teacup he found that looks like me. Thanks, Asgore. Still avoiding the world and the king, the author again hints that they are Alphys, being that we see a teacup in the shape of a yellow dinosaur on a desk in the upper lab. Entry number 21. Spend all my time at the garbage dump now. It's my element. Final evidence that the author is Alphys. The dump is the go-to place for Alphys for dates, excursions, and contemplation. She also routinely compares herself to trash. So those are the entries in assumedly the correct order. The story being told here, briefly summarised, is how Alphys, in her attempts to unlock the power of the soul, accidentally caused the creation of the amalgams and, more importantly, Flowey. Alphys then starts hiding from everyone in order to avoid taking responsibility. Some other things then happen to Dr. Alphys in regards to Metaton's fame and befriending Undyne, but that's beyond the scope of the entries. So that story, at face value, is the context for these entries. Who wrote them? Alphys. Why? To catalogue her thoughts around the determination experiments. When? A bit before the main character adventures through the underground. But I know what you're thinking as a Chad timeline anachronism enthusiast. Wait, how can the author be Alphys? How can she know about the Queen when she obviously doesn't know her during the pacifist ending? How can Alphys know of a time before any human souls? Is she ancient? I suppose at this point I should address the fact that there is a distinct lack of an entry 17 in the True Lab.
Yeah, but I mean, it's also the fact, I mean, we know that in Undertale, boss monsters are essentially immortal until they have a child. So, I mean, Grant, is Alphys a boss monster? Actually, let me check this up. Yeah, I did a little looking up, and nobody can really come to a concrete answer, because, so again, if she is a boss monster, that would explain how she's able to be around for such a long time. So, I don't know.
Because with that one entry, it changes the entire context of the story being told here. These entries are not what they seem.
Though then again, that's also talking like that's also the whole thing. It's like, if all of these are made by the same people, because I mean, there is the very real distinction that some of the entries were made by Gaster, including number 17. And then the ones afterward made by Alphys.
Now you'll see the 2 entries for entry 17. One is inaccessible due to being unused and only appears in the earlier versions of Undertale. In this entry, the author explains how monsters' bodies can't handle large concentrations of determination and everyone's melted together. There is an arrow pointing to the determination extractor screen with a question mark, as I thought, well, maybe that's where it was meant to be, but was decided against later by Toby. As I believe Toby realised that not only does Alphys say as much when we turn the elevator power back on, but also he may have wanted to use that spot for the determination extractor screen. It's pretty inconsequential in terms of lore, and I don't think it's canon hidden content, as Toby removed it from the code in later versions. The other one I call the Wingdings entry, or just entry 17, as the other entry can be wholly discounted. This was supposedly made by former royal scientist Gaster. Forget that. This entry 17, like the previous entry 17, isn't technically part of the Undertale game. You can't actually reach it during normal gameplay, and you have to hack the game to change the code so you can be taken to a room that contains only this entry that automatically plays. So, what is this context-changing entry? Time for the obligatory entry 17 reading. Entry number 17. Dark. Darker. Yet darker. The darkness keeps growing. The shadows cutting deeper. Photon readings negative. This next experiment seems very, very interesting. ... What do you two think? So what's happening here? Assumedly, Gaster is the one speaking here, as I believe he is the one the boat person alludes to when they state, "Beware the man who speaks in hands," and Wingdings has hand symbols in the font. Also, the room this entry appears...
Either that, or Gaster is mute and he speaks in sign language. Again, we've never met him, so at this point, we don't know.
...is called room_Gaster in the file, so that's more of a giveaway. This line from the boat person also implies that handwriting, in conjunction with speaking in hands, refers to text that is written in Wingdings. Therefore, anything written in handwriting, like some things that we come across later in the game, have a connection to Gaster somehow.
Handwriting.
This is another one of Toby's determination/refuse double meanings. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself here.
All these double meaning words. Oh god,
So before I go ahead with explaining who wrote what and how, let me explain to those of you who aren't in the loop who both of our royal scientists are.
Yeah.
The position of royal scientist is a singular one, with one monster holding the office at any one time. Alphys is the current royal scientist. She is a monster of great intellect and ability, sans any social ability. However, she's not all she seems. You see, if we ask around about Alphys and snoop through some houses, we find out she's a bit of a fraud. Less a scientist and more of a love-struck, desperate dork. Let's start from when Alphys was made royal scientist. She was made royal scientist after she presented Metaton to Asgore and described him as a robot with a soul. Asgore, who has long wanted to be able to break free from the underground and knows that a monster's soul cannot last outside of its body after death, is amazed to see that a monster's soul was able to be transferred to another vessel. This means that monster's soul power can now be harvested and used like he wanted to break the barrier.
When in actuality, it's a robot being haunted by a ghost. Monster, yeah. Okay.
Metaton, however, is not a monster soul within a machine vessel, but instead a ghost possessing a machine body. You see, ghosts can possess anything, be it an anime doll or a training dummy. They only become corporeal and one with the vessel once they've fully linked with the vessel. Before that, they are merely puppeting the vessel around. So again, Metaton isn't a robot with a soul, he's just a ghost puppeting this vessel designed by Alphys around. But why did Alphys build the vessel for him? Well, Alphys created this vessel for Metaton after she joined his human fan club and became friends with him while he was still a lowly ghost by the name of Hapstablook. Hapstablook is delighted with how this new form looked and decided to take Alphys up on her offer to have it built for him. Alphys then describes this vessel inhabited by Hapstablook, now known as Metaton, to Asgore as a robot with a soul. The reason she lies to Asgore
technically,
like this is because Alphys has had a crush on Asgore for a long time and wants to impress him. So she lies to make herself seem much more capable than she really is, much in the same way she lies to Undyne about human stuff to impress her. It's a problem she has. Asgore, after seeing Metaton, immediately makes Alphys the royal scientist and tasks her with unleashing the power of the soul, something she's incapable of doing as she is a fraud. Hence, the determination experiments going out of control, Flowey being created, and Alphys ultimately hiding herself away from the problems she's created for herself. But
So, with all that being said, Yeah, that again, that's a lot of stuff that I'm being reminded of. Though I will say, I did not remember anywhere like hearing that at one point she had a crush on Asgore. That is news to me, but I can definitely see that does definitely lean more towards my saying that she's not a very good scientist at all, is she?
Alphys wasn't the only royal scientist. There is of course the brilliant Dr. W.D. Gaster. Very little is known about him. However, we can piece together a small understanding of what he was like and the time he lived in. Most of his backstory can be gleaned from these mysterious Gaster followers that sometimes appear in-game. They only give us a few lines of dialogue each, so in summary, this is what we know about Gaster from these NPCs.
Wait, you're forgetting
Gaster
one.
was the former royal scientist. He was apparently even more talented than Dr. Alphys, and Alphys was hired a long time after Gaster disappeared. Gaster created the core, the gargantuan machine that turns geothermal heat into magical electricity. Gaster's life was cut short. It was cut short while doing an experiment, falling into his creation, vanishing and scattering across time and space. From these snippets, we can deduce a few things that aren't explicitly mentioned. Firstly, Alphys is the only royal scientist who have been hired since Gaster disappeared. Secondly, Gaster existed a long time ago. If Gaster did indeed create the core, and possibly as royal scientist created or at least worked in the True Lab, then judging by the dilapidation and weathering of both of these buildings, we can assume that Gaster worked during a time before the wires started to fall out of the walls in the core, and before the walls in the True Lab started to crack. After all, he definitely built at least one of these places during his lifetime. That means however long it took for these buildings to deteriorate to this condition is approximately how long ago Gaster was around and kicking.
Which, I mean, actually, when you say it like that, that does almost mean that even if, without like Frisk falling into the underground, the monster's just way of life was on like a ticking time, was a ticking time bomb. If their main source of like electricity and power was slowly falling apart, and it doesn't seem like anybody had the skills of Gaster to like repair it or at least maintain it to a full proper like requirements.
There's also the suppositions we can make from the things we don't hear. None of the other monsters we meet speak of W.D. Gaster. No one remembers him aside from his strange followers, and I can't verify if they even exist in the same way anyone else ever has.
Yeah, because they're all very grey.
Has vanished from public consciousness, much like the memory of Toriel has. No one today remembers there was a W.D. Gaster, meaning again, he probably lived ages ago.
Okay. Now you see that? Okay, that adds a whole another level. Because, like, everybody you see talks about, like, Gaster, like, being split up across, like, time and space, being, like, ripped to shreds, and, like, and now being, like, this being outside of, like, reality. But we could Occam's Razor this and just say that he died so long ago and nobody talks about him because he's become like a historic figure that nobody bothers to look up anymore. And he's just he lived so long ago that like he's one of those people that like, oh, he's very important to like how life is nowadays, but like nobody bothers to look him up anymore because like why would they? It's been so many generations since he's been alive, and it just comes down to the whole fact that like the only people that would remember him are boss monsters, which I mean the only ones that we really have any confirmation on are like Toriel and Asgore, and the only people and with Toriel, and the same with Toriel, the only reason people remember Asgore is because he's actively being their ruler. Oh, okay, that puts a lot of things in a very different light.
Finally, there's the possibility that Gaster isn't exactly dead. Yes, his life was cut short, but he also fell into his creation and vanished without a trace. Anyone who understands basic writing tropes know that if you don't explicitly kill someone in front of the camera and instead leave their death as a mere possibility, then that character probably isn't dead.
Again, I was just talking, again, what I was saying, I was just like, I had never even thought of that possibility before. So, I mean, that does change the possibility of a lot of things. That it is cool.
Whatever happened to Gaster caused him to disappear. That doesn't mean he's dead. In any case, those are our two royal scientists. So going back to what we were talking about, how does Gaster's entry 17 affect the other entries? Well, if Gaster definitely wrote entry 17, then it stands to reason that he'd have written all the other entries we see in the lab as well. I mean, he's using the exact same numbering convention as all the other entries, so one would assume entry 17 is part of the same group of entries, especially since that specific entry is missing from the lab itself. However, much like with Alphys as the sole author of all of these entries, that's impossible. The timeline of events in Undertale wouldn't stack up.
Okay, so what I'm almost seeing of this is just like, obviously these are like lab entries for like science experiments and all that sort of stuff. It could very much be here, I'm going to guess that he's kind of leaning towards this given the different numbers and or the different colors of the numbers. But these could be like a mixed up amalgamation of two different sets of lab reports that have just been kind of mixed up and, mixed together.
Not to mention that this entry is entirely in Wingdings as opposed to all of the other entries, so all I'll say here is watch entry 17 again and compare it with a regular entry.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Notice anything? There is a worrying difference in the entry from Gaster, and it's not the disturbing sounds we hear. It's staring us right in the face, but we can't see it, can we? We can't see anything.
There's no actual, entry prompt at the beginning.
If we start from the position that Gaster definitely wrote entry 17, then it stands to reason that at least some of the preceding entries should have been written by him if he was the only other royal scientist aside from Alphys, correct? But that assumption creates problems. If there can be only one royal scientist at any given time, being that Asgore hired Alphys as royal scientist sometime after Gaster disappeared, then why doesn't Gaster write his other entries, assumedly some of the entries prior to entry 17, in Wingdings? And don't get me started on the problem of the glaring timeline anachronisms that arise if these entries were written sequentially, one after the other.
Yeah.
I need to rectify this situation, and so that means Soggy's gonna finally address the well-known fact that there seems to be two different writing styles that appear throughout the 21 entries. That's what's up with the different coloured numbers on the map I made.
Of course, yeah, there we go.
In addition to different writing styles, I'll also be explaining what I mean by timeline anachronisms as well.
Okay, so I just thought of something, and I'm gonna have to see whether he actually goes into this, but I'm almost thinking he's saying writing on the wall, and to get entry 17 you have to specifically load up the game in a special way where you're just brought up to a screen where it says on there. Could it be that that when you load up entry 17 you're actually seeing Gaster typing in entry 17 in real time? That's why we don't get the whole marker at the beginning saying entry 17, the variant, all that sort of stuff. It's the fact that entry 17 is just the normal header of the entry, and then whatever is typed in afterwards appears, or is typed in, I should say, and then we're literally seeing it be created in real time there. Okay.
So there are two different writing styles for the TrueLab entries. One is all lowercase, and one is correct grammar and capitalization. This difference is incredibly important, as the implication is that there are two different writers, with two distinct writing styles.
Then why is 16 orange?
One for the normally written entries, and one for the lowercase entries, as shown here in yellow and red respectively. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. While the differences are minor, they're also consistently different. They're also evenly spread out across the 21 entries, with 10 normally written entries and 10 lowercase entries, with the Wingdings entry being the obvious outlier. These consistent differences are very likely deliberate as opposed to accidental or adding flavour or whatever. 16 is orange because I can't tell if that's the lowercase writer or not, but I'm 90% sure it's meant to be the lowercase writer.
Ah, okay,
now, I know that sounds like a stretch, that capitalization means two different authors, but in Undertale, capitalization plays a key role in certain characters' speaking and writing styles. Sans and Napstablook, for example, speak and write in all lowercase. Papyrus speaks and writes in all capitals. The King speaks and writes
Normally, yeah.
Basically, and not to get too lost in the point, capitalization does play a major role when certain characters are talking or writing. And that's the thing that I've been really stumped on for a long time as I looked at these entries. Who is saying what in this conversation if it isn't meant to be one person doing the writing? Who are our two writers for the entries? The first suspect, who is pretty much an obvious candidate for one of the two writing styles, is
Alphys, yeah.
The entries 11, 20 and 21 all hint to the fact that Alphys is their author. In entry 11 there's talk of building Metaton, something Alphys did. In entry 20 there's talk of a teacup that looks like the author, and there's a teacup that looks like Alphys sitting on a desk upstairs. And in entry 21 the author states that they spend all their time at the dump.
And wait a second, the ones that are all lowercase are Alphys? Okay.
A go-to spot for Alphys to hang out. This implies that the rest of the lowercase entries are by her as well, entries 9, 10, 12, 13, 16, 18 and 19. But the obvious problem then presents itself. All these entries are lowercase. Alphys never speaks or writes in lowercase. If my theory that entry capitalization styles means different entry authors, then Alphys should be out of the running for the aforementioned entries, and therefore must be the normal entry author, right? She only ever speaks normally. However, that then creates new problems, the timeline anachronisms that I mentioned earlier. The normally typed entries speak of times before humans fell into the underground,
not to
specifically
scale.
entry 2, and they mention the Queen in entry 8. This means Alphys would have to be incredibly old for her to be the normal entry author, as well as her lifespan overlapping Gaster's tenure as royal scientist, something that's impossible as she was made royal scientist after Gaster disappeared. As we know, Alphys doesn't know who the Queen is or recognise her voice, implying that she hasn't even watched the videos down in the True Lab, and that just raises further questions about how much she actually knows. So if Alphys is the normal entry author due to the way she speaks, then who built Metaton if she's not the lowercase author? Why does Alphys have a cup that looks like her if she's not the lowercase author? Who else constantly hangs out in the dump if she's not the lowercase author? How is she so old if she's the normal author? And why is she pretending to not know the Queen if she's the normal author? Stepping back, it seems we have two authors separated by writing styles and time frames. The lowercase entries being written relatively recently, and the normal entries written ages ago. However, Alphys and her speech patterns don't seem to fit into the correct time frame. So where do we go from here? It's at this point we need to understand the medium in which these entries are presented to.
Okay, so I'm starting to get like really confused here. As the more he talks, the more like my knowledge and like thought of Undertale lore gets unraveled, and I am very curious as to where this is going.
To us. No, Alphys doesn't speak or write in lowercase, but the entries in the True Lab aren't spoken to us or written down on a note. They appear on screens, they're electronic, typed up for us, and we read them as such. And how does Alphys usually type? In all lowercase.
In all lower. Okay.
All through Hotland, we receive typed updates from Alphys via our newly upgraded phone. These updates are mostly in lowercase, with a few being written in all caps when her attentions have been aroused, or with incorrect grammar when she is seemingly rushing to type things, or trying to lampoon Mew Mew Kissy Cutie 2. All up, her typing percentages look like this. Now, the fact that she would normally write in lowercase unless something shocking happens, which echoes how the TrueLab entry 16 is written when compared to the other lowercase entries, puts her as a very likely candidate for the lowercase author, especially when this fact is combined with the content of the lowercase entries. And by process of elimination, that leaves only one person who could have written the normal entries. Let's talk about some videotapes, and then it will all make sense.
Here we go.
Remember those videos I mentioned earlier? They contain old VHS recordings of the Dreamer family. The recordings show events taking place over a wide span of time and varying places. Let's watch them and I'll tell you what's happening, where they're happening, and who's in them. Tape 1.
Here we go. Oh god, yeah, Toriel and her jokes.
In this video, we have Asgore and Toriel, still married, and Toriel expecting to soon give birth to Asriel. This places the time frame of this video to be some time before the first human arrived, at the end of 21X.
Because she's still pregnant,
possibly the
yeah.
start of 21X. The background music that we hear in the videos is the music we hear in Toriel's house in the ruins, which makes sense as they moved to new home after Asriel was born, so prior to that, they would have still been in the ruins. So we can assume that this recording was being taken in the bedroom in Toriel's house. The music is slowed down 20%. Tape 2. In this video, we have the first human and Asriel, with Asriel getting the first human to do their iconic trademark creepy face. The background noise we're hearing are birds, and this sound file only appears in the throne room, so we can assume that's where Asriel and the first human are playing. It does appear during the Sans genocide fight in the church, but that's relatively the same area. Basically somewhere near the throne room, just more than likely the throne room. The fact that the human is here and Asriel is alive means that this is sometime near the end of 21X, or after the start of 22X. It's about 6 to 10 years later since the other video judging by Asriel's assumed age as a kid. The bird noises are slowed down 20%. Tape 3.
Oh god, yeah.
Again we hear Asriel talking to the first human about creepy faces, buttercups, and the first human beginning to ask Asriel about their devious plan. They are once again in the throne room judging by the bird noises sometime after the previous video, maybe days or weeks, but it's hard to say. The bird noises are now slowed down 10%. Tape 4. We hear Asriel sobbing about the suicidal plan the first human has to free everyone. Assumedly, this video was taken on accident as it seems to follow on from the previous conversation in the previous video. It starts abruptly a few minutes after the last video ended. So, likely someone maybe hit the record button on accident. However, the intent doesn't really matter, the outcome is the same. The bird noises aren't slowed down in this video though. I think what Toby was going for with the speed change for the bird noises is that the characters are getting closer to the barrier or closer to the throne room, but I don't think Toby wanted it to sound faster. You see, the code Toby uses here is actually meant to change the pitch of the bird noises, but I've tested it out myself and all it does is create the effect of a lower pitch by slowing down the bird noises. So what he wanted was for the bird noises to sound less muffled, but instead they just got faster. Hence the bird noises outside speeding up as they get closer, assumedly to the throne room or barrier. I mean, that's my best guess anyway. Tape 5.
Also, I only just noticed that they're using the name Chris for Chara. I guess we don't really ever figure out the real name, so I guess that's usable, yeah.
In this video, the Dreamer family are begging the first human to hold on to life while Asriel eventually staggers out a sad yet terrified affirmation of his intent to carry out the first human's plan. The background music is called Ooh.
Yeah, that's a good name.
Only really found around the lab in Hotland. This implies that the video is being recorded somewhere around this area. Being that the sound file is quieter than it normally is and slowed down 40%, which implies that Toby wanted it to sound muffled, I'm going to say that that means it's happening inside the lab and possibly the true lab. Another point of correlation for that is the drone sound we hear at the start of the lab or true lab. When ooh is sped up by 66.6% and a high pass filter is applied to it, it can sound like... See, they kind of sound the same.
Sure, yeah.
It is a weak point of correlation. So, what do all these videos show us? Well, aside from the grim nature of the first human and the start of a breakdown of a family, they don't really show us anything. I mean, literally, we can't see anything.
Yeah.
But we do hear sounds. We hear characters speaking to each other. And they show us what a video shot in darkness is like.
Video shot in darkness. Darker yet darker.
The tapes are completely black. Tape 1 is black because the room is too dark for the video to come out. Tapes 2, 3 and 4 are completely black because Azrael has left the lens cap on. And tape 5, well, to answer that we need to know how tape 5 exists to begin with. Tape 5 takes place somewhere in the lab because of the ooh sound we can hear in the background. We can't see anything, so that would imply it was shot somewhere dark or the lens cap was left on. I mean, there's the possibility Azrael still hasn't taken the lens cap off the camera and is filming all this, but in saying that, I don't think this tape is actually from that same family camera like the other tapes. I mean, surely no one's standing around filming this child's slow death, let alone Azrael. So, who or what is filming? Well, ask yourself, where is this video taking place?
In the
More
lab.
than likely the lab. Can the lab be very dark to the point you can't see near the walls, meaning a video probably wouldn't come out just like tape 1? Yes. And finally, does the lab itself have cameras?
Yes.
Yes. So from this, it's very possible that tape 5 is not shot from the family camera, but was actually a moment caught on camera by the security system. And if we're not in the upstairs lab, but in the true lab, in which multiple objects are described as dark in the game files, and the atmosphere is already dank and gloomy to begin with, it's not too much of a stretch to think that the video wouldn't come out in a place like this either, assuming this lab also has security cameras, which I would assume a secret
Probably
lab
does,
probably
yeah.
does. That's why I think tape 5 is completely black, and that's why we have video of this moment as well, because it's security footage in a dark lab. Again, I doubt the family members are standing around with the same camera, with the same lens cap on, recording their adopted child's slow death. This has to be security footage. And guess what? I believe that's what entry 17 is as well.
And that is it for now. If you want to see the second part of this reaction, links to it are in the description in the top corner of the video, as well as it should be, appearing over my face any second now. I hope you guys liked. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if you have not, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.